This is the fourth in our series of podcasts called Texas Crime Files, Rodney Reed. He is the Texas man who was to have been executed on November 20th, 2019. But with only 5 days until Reed was scheduled to die in a Texas prison, there have been significant new developments. On Friday, November 15th, 2019, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals blocked Reed's execution. They will allow a lower court to consider his claim that the state presented false testimony and that he is innocent. The stay of Reed's execution means the case will go back to a state judge in Bastrop County, Texas, where he was convicted. Reed was sentenced to death there more than 20 years ago for the 1996 rape and strangling of 19-year-old Stacy Stites. DNA found in Stites' body matched that of Rodney Reed's. He says that's because they were having a consensual affair and that they had sex days before her body was found. Reed denies killing Stites, and his defense attorneys say they have evidence that exonerates him and allegedly implicates Stites' fiancé at the time, Jimmy Fennell. Lawyers with the Innocence Project say they have new medical testimony that puts Stites' original time of death into question. And they have new witness statements that were not heard during the 1996 trial and in the subsequent appeals. To learn more about this new ruling by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, I spoke by phone with KVUE TV senior reporter Tony Plohetski.
It was definitely huge news. It was a big news day. It was relief for Rodney Reed's legal team, but of course it was a disappointing development for people who truly believe that Rodney Reed is guilty and justice has been served in this case. Earlier this month, Rodney Reed and his defense team made a number of assertions in their application for relief, is the legal term. And they basically bring forward a number of claims. One of them is that there were Brady violations. So under the Constitution, prosecutors must relay and provide to the defense favorable information that they have in their possession in order to help the defense side build their case. And so Rodney Reed's legal team is suggesting that the state had information that they did not give over during Rodney Reed's trial. Another one of their claims is that Rodney Reed, and this is a striking one, is actually innocent, and that is a legal standard that no reasonable juror would find a defendant guilty. So what they are suggesting is that because of new information that has been brought forward by Rodney Reed and his defense team, that if a jury looked at that information today, they would not find him guilty. And so because of that, they believe that Reed reaches the standard for actual innocence. So there are a number of different claims that they bring forward, and essentially what the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals has said in this ruling is not that they necessarily agree with Rodney Reed's team, but what they are saying is that Rodney Reed and his defense lawyers meet the legal standard, that all of these things that they have brought forward merits further development. In other words, further investigation by the court, further exploration by the court, and that's what's going to be happening now in coming months.
So the matter now goes to a district court judge?
That's right. So what the Court of Criminal Appeals said is we are now going to send this back to the trial court, the district court in Bastrop County. And a judge is going to, over the next few months, be going through this information, these new claims, piece by piece, claim by claim, evidence by evidence, to determine whether or not the trial court agrees or disagrees with Rodney Reed's legal team. They will submit what they call findings of fact and conclusions of law. And then the case will once again go back to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which, by the way, is the state's highest criminal court, they will then decide whether or not they agree with the trial court or disagree with the trial court. If the trial court says that they believe Rodney Reed is entitled to relief, that could be obviously a joyous day for Rodney Reed, but the sign-off still has to come from the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals.
Did this ruling surprise you?
I think a lot of observers think that that this was not a surprising turn of events, that people who've been following this case have felt all along that there is legitimate new evidence, that there are things that absolutely must be reviewed further before Rodney Reed faces death. And so I think for a lot of people, this was not a surprising turn of events. I think the big question all along was going to be whether or not Rodney Reed's legal team got over that legal threshold. But again, the court has ruled that they did.
How long can a process like this take?
This process is not going to be something that happens fast. I think that the trial court has to set dates for possible hearings that could happen in the next few months. But then I think the trial court judge is going to be very deliberate in going through all of this information, writing their findings of fact and conclusions of law. And then the Court of Criminal Appeals, I expect, is going to be very cautious and very deliberative about reviewing whatever it is the trial court says. So I think it's going to take, from what I am understanding, 9 months, 10 months, maybe a year, maybe even longer before we have a final resolution on this.
Tony, your final thoughts on this story now that the magnitude has soaked in and what appears to be, at least temporarily, a victory for those who are supporting Rodney Reed?
I think that most people agree that Rodney Reed should not be executed as long as there are these outstanding questions and these outstanding legal questions as it relates to the case. And I think, obviously, that people who have been following this case are very thrilled and very relieved that Rodney Reed is going to have an opportunity for all of these pieces of evidence, all of this new information to be reviewed by the courts.
The stay of execution was the second of two positive legal developments for Reed and his supporters that occurred on November 15th. Earlier that day, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles recommended that Governor Greg Abbott grant a 120-day reprieve to allow for consideration of new evidence that could prove Reed's innocence. Also on the 15th, the celebrity Kim Kardashian West visited Reed in the prison where he is being held. She later tweeted, and I quote, "So grateful for the commitment and passion of everyone who voiced their support." This will remain a developing story in the months ahead, and Texas Crime Files will continue to provide updates and interviews in the closely followed case of Rodney Reed. Texas Crime Files is produced by KVUE TV, known as KVUE in Texas, a Tegna-owned station. Special thanks to producer Sarah Bryant and to KVUE TV reporter Tony Plohetski. You can hear the entire Texas Crime Files podcast series on the KVUE YouTube page, or you can download our series from your favorite podcast sources. I'm Bob Buckaloo for Texas Crime Files.